October, November 2021. So let's start. The line XX is the production possibility curve of workers picking peas and beans in a 10-hour working day. Say so this is your original production possibility curve for workers working 10 hours a day. What could cause the workers PVC to shift to line YY? अब क्या हो रहा है? Now the line is shifted to Y. मतलब they are the quantity of peas picked per day is increasing, while the quantities of beans picked per day is falling. So what is happening? A decrease in working hours to 8 per day, and a machine that increases the workers' peas picking productivity. B, a machine that increases the workers' pea picking productivity only. C is a new work schedule where the workers spend 6 hours per day picking peas and only 4 hours per bean. And D is a reduction in working hours to 8 per day. What should be the right answer if your PVC is pivoting? Yeah, it should be A because the working hours are decreasing. And since the working hours are decreasing, you will be picking less number of beans. But in the meantime, for the same number of hours, your productivity for peas is increasing, which means that there has been an improvement in production of peas. So that is why an introduction of a machine that increases workers peas picking productivity. तो ये जो है वो आपका y axis it will pivot upwards. Why it shouldn't be C? A new work schedule where workers spend 6 hours per day picking peas and only 4 picking the beans. C क्यों नहीं होगा आंसर? Why the answer is not C for this question? There is still a limited number of workers. नहीं, देखो ये जो आपका PPC बना है ओरिजिनल वाला, इसका क्या मतलब है? Like if you are at this point, you are spending 10 hours for picking peas, and at this point you were spending 10 hours for beans. So yeah, so if a work is scheduled where workers spend 6 hours per day picking peas. So the 6 hours, uh, the number of hours for peas is increasing. सही, तो 6 घंटे में तो फिर यहाँ पे कहीं आना चाहिए था ना मेरा बच्चा. So that is why option C is incorrect. सही, और बाकी दो तो obviously incorrect है. What is a function of money? Divisibility, durability, portability, medium of exchange. Function. What is the difference between function and characteristics? Characteristics are those attributes that something has in order to be termed as money or in order to be termed as a legal tender. Say the function kya hai? The function of money is it acts as a medium of exchange. Yeah, good job. What is classified as public good by an economist? हाँ भाई, public good क्या होगा? Non-rival or non-excludable भी. Flood defenses, government-funded hospitals, government-run national parks, the internet. Something that is non-rival and non-excludable as well. Government-funded hospitals and government-run national parks can be uh, rival at some point. Like अगर आपके पास जो fixed number of hospital में rooms हैं या जो भी wards वगैरह fill up हो गए, now the hospital is rival. Same goes with the case of public parks. The only thing that will be non-rival and non-excludable is flood defense. Which statement about factors of production is correct? The factor capital includes shares and deposit accounts. The factor labor includes human-made resources. The factor land includes forest and undiscovered copper. The factor enterprise takes risk and is rewarded as interest. हाँ भाई. The factor land includes forest and undiscovered copper. Which supply curve shows that the price elasticity of supply of the good is always equals to 1. PES is equals to 1. कौन से वाले होते हैं PES equals to 1? Yeah, the straight line that passes through the origin. सही है, जो भी line आपकी origin से pass हो रही होगी. Here we have quantity on the y-axis and price. Regardless, all these supply curves S0, S1, S2, S3 have PES value equals to 1. Look at question number 6. What would cause a shift in the supply curve for a good and movement in the supply curve? Change in the demand, a decrease in factor productivity, an increase in the price of a good, of a complementary good, and increase in the wage rate. And for movement along the curve, we have increase in the price of a substitute, the imposition of a tax on the good, an increase in the factor productivity, and D, a change in the demand for the good. Because a change in the price of a substitute will affect the demand. Say C क्या है बेटा? An increase in the factor productivity. बेटा मेरा बच्चा का factor productivity increase होगा तो आपका supply curve will shift outwards. Say it won't cause movement along the curve. Say this is incorrect. A क्या है? A change in demand for good X. If there is a change in the demand for good X, this will cause movement along the supply curve. You will be moving from point A to point B. So this is incorrect. Both A and C are incorrect. D should be the right answer. Increase in the wage rate. If the wages are increasing, supply curve will shift backwards. And a change in the demand for good X. If the demand is changing, you will move from point A to point B. So the answer should be D. The market for mobile phones is initially at equilibrium X. This is X. This is your initial equilibrium point. The government then imposes a sales tax. What is government's total tax revenue from this tax? So what will be the total tax amount collected by the government? After tax, this is your new supply curve. And this is the new market equilibrium. A fall in the quantity. This whole square or rectangle will be the tax revenue collected by the government. सही सारा का सारा क्या हो जाएगा? टैक्स रेवेन्यू जो गवर्नमेंट कलेक्ट करिए. यू जे एक्स एंड एस तब होता जब आपकी क्वांटिटी Q1 पर ही रहती. सही है, बट द क्वांटिटी इज फॉलिंग टू Q2. अब Q2 पे क्या हो रहा है? दिस इज योर न्यू मार्केट इक्विलिब्रियम T. सही है, एंड दिस इज अ पैरेलल डिफरेंस, एंड दिस पैरेलल डिफरेंस इलस्ट्रेट्स अमाउंट ऑफ द टैक्स. सही है, So TKRM should be the tax revenue collected by the government, which is TKMR. Is that clear? It shouldn't be UJXS because आपकी quantity fall कर रही है. What is an example of rationing function of the price mechanism? You want me to go back to this question, or you want me to just wait in general? Agaji, what is an example of a rationing function of the price mechanism? Like price acts as a rationing mechanism. They allocate quantity. When the price of a product is falling, firms will allocate less resources to its production. When the price of a product is falling, the government can set an effective minimum price. When the price of a product is rising, firms will expand production of the product to make profits. When the price of a product is rising, some consumers will no longer be able to buy it. How does price ration? Like how does price make ensures someone will buy how much quantity? Like if you can afford the price, then you can get the good. If you cannot, then obviously you have to leave the consumption. So इसका मतलब क्या है? When the price of a product is rising, some consumers will no longer be able to afford it, and there will be a fall in the quantity. So yes, that is price acting as a rationing mechanism rather than the government. The price is telling how many units of the good will be sold and who will be buying the good. So basically, for whom to produce the good. Look at question number 9. In 2016, car drivers bought more fuel because the price of oil from which it was made had fallen. Which diagram represents this change in the market for fuel? हाँ भाई, the oil that is used for fuel is falling, which means that the raw material price is going down. And when there is a fall in the price of raw material, what will happen to the supply? The supply will shift outwards because the cost of production will be going down. So option A, B, and C. All three are incorrect. Yeah, because इनमें आपकी supply is constant. Option D is correct, where your supply is shifting outwards from S1 to S2. And obviously, when the supply shifts out, the price will fall to P2. The diagram shows the demand and supply curves for bread in a developed economy. Bread is a substitute for pasta and rice. What would cause the demand curve for bread to shift from D1 to D2 in a developed economy? Basically, your demand is shifting outwards. A rise in the price of pasta and rice, a decrease in the real income, a recession and rising unemployment, and D, a subsidy given to the producers of pasta and rice. So why would the demand for the good will shift outwards? Yeah, because the price of substitutes is increasing, more people will switch to bread. And when more people will switch to bread, the demand will shift out. Look at question number 11. The table shows the quantity demanded of three goods. when the price of a good changes of good X changes. Price of X is 54321. Quantity of X demanded. Then you have quantity of Y demanded and the quantity of Z demanded. So ये तीन गुड्स हैं आपके पास, X, Y and Z, और ये हैं आपके पास prices of good X. Which relationship between X, Y and Z can be deduced from the table? देखो अब आपने बताना है कि X की साथ Y की relationship क्या है and what is the relationship with Z as well. So if the price of X is falling, say X की the quantity demanded will increase. But what is happening with the quantity demanded of Y? It is also falling, say, because the quantity demanded of X increases, then the quantity demanded of Y is falling, which means that both are likely to be the substitutes. नहीं मेरा बच्चा कॉम्प्लीमेंट्स क्यों होंगे? कॉम्प्लीमेंट्स जब होते हैं जब आपकी क्वांटिटी इंक्रीज हो रही होती, like अगर quantity demanded of cars is increasing, then the quantity demanded for petrol will increase. But here the quantity demanded of Y is falling because more and more consumers are switching to good X, which means Y is a substitute of X, not complement. And what is happening with Z? As the price is going down, the quantity is increasing. 20 to 22 to 28, then 40, and then 60, which means that X and Z, they are both complements. They are jointly demanded. So the answer will be C. The diagram shows the three supply curves, S1, S2, S3. What can be concluded by price elasticity? Price elasticity क्या होगी भाई इसकी? Because all the supply curves are passing through the origin, it should be at price elasticity, the price elasticity of supply curves of each curve is constant. So at any price elasticity of supply PS2, nahin. It will be constant for all the three of them. Why? Because the value of PES is equals to 1. Good job. Look at question number 13. The diagram shows the market for smartphones in India. Rising incomes in India have seen the demand for this normal good to shift from D1 to D2. सही से आपके incomes बढ़ रही है, demand increase हो रही है. Which area now represents the consumer surplus and which area now represents the producer surplus? ये था पहले. This area was the producer surplus and G and J was the consumer surplus. Now, since the demand curve is shifting outwards, you have this point as the new market equilibrium, which means कि consumer surplus जब ये हो गया, FMH is the consumer surplus, while the producer surplus will be HM and K. HM, K and FMH. Yeah, the answer will be A. A nationalized industry is privatized. Assuming there is no change in the output of the industry in the short run, what are the direct effects of the change? एक नेशनलाइज इंडस्ट्री को आपने प्राइवेटाइज कर दिया, मतलब आपने एक गवर्नमेंट स्टेट ओन एंटरप्राइज को बेच दिया. Assuming there is no change in the output of the industry in the short run, what are the direct effects of the change? अगर short run में अपनी production को change नहीं करे, what will be the change? Size of the public sector decreases, no change. Proportion of industry output entering the market, increase, no change, increase, no change. The proportion of the industry output will not be changing at in the short run. Why? Because they have already mentioned, assuming there is no change in the output नहीं change हो रहा. But what will happen to the size of the public sector? The size of the public sector will obviously reduce because now you have more प्राइवेट सेक्टर, क्योंकि आपने गवर्नमेंट स्टेट ओन इंटरप्राइजेस को, पब्लिक सेक्टर को नेशनलाइज कर दिया है. सही है. सो द साइज ऑफ द पब्लिक सेक्टर विल डिक्रीज. आंसर विल बी बी. Look at question number 15. What is a distinguishing feature of a progressive income tax? Progressive income tax का क्या feature होता है? High earners pay a higher proportion of their income in tax than low income earners. Yeah. High earners pay lower proportion. This is regressive. High earners pay the same. This is proportional. Low earners pay more. This is also proportional. Answer will be A. Why might a government nationalize a private firm? गवर्नमेंट नेशनलाइज क्यों करेगी किसी प्राइवेट फर्म को? टू गेन ग्रेटर एफिशिएंसी ड्यू टू मोर कंपटीशन, टू इंक्रीज merit good provision, to increase the choice for the consumer, to raise the tax. Yeah. So the only correct option is B, provision of the merit good. Competition कम होगा nationalization से, choices भी consumer के पास कम हो जाएंगी most probably, because if they start operating as a monopoly, and tax revenue कम होगा, public expenditure बढ़ेगा. The diagram shows a firm supply and demand curves for Apple. If the minimum price is increased from P1 to P2, पहले आपका minimum price ये था P1, now the minimum price is P2. What will happen to the amount of apples sold? Will decrease from Q1 to Q2, will decrease from Q4 Q1 to Q2 Q3. It will increase from Q3 to Q4. It will increase from Q3 Q2 to Q4 Q1. सही. पहले जब आपने minimum price लगाया हुआ था, earlier when the minimum price was P1, this was the quantity being sold, no? Q1. And this was the quantity supplied. So there was this surplus. But if it is increased to P2, the quantity would fall to Q2. Quantity आपकी Q2 पे fall हो गई. It will decrease from Q1 to Q2. See? So this is the change in the quantity. Look at 18. In an attempt to reduce the crime, a government introduces a subsidy on the production of burglar alarms, but sales rise very little. The government ने subsidy दे दी, but sales बहुत कम से increase है. What possible characteristics of the good would lead to this outcome? आपने सब्सिडी दी, प्राइस कम हुआ, लेकिन क्वांटिटी इतनी ज्यादा नहीं बढ़ी, इक्विलिब्रियम क्वांटिटी इंक्रीज नहीं हुई. In which scenario is this possible? Most likely to be possible. या डी. पीईडी भी आपकी इनइलास्टिक हो और पीईएस भी इनइलास्टिक हो. जब दोनों इनइलास्टिक होंगे तो सब्सिडी विल बी ineffective in introducing quantity. Compared with Pakistan, Germany has a higher output of pharmaceutical per unit of resources. What could explain this? Germany has higher output of pharmaceutical per unit of resources. हाँ भाई, मतलब वो ज्यादा प्रोड्यूस कर सकते हैं with lesser resources. The existence of floating exchange rate, the law of absolute advantage, the Marshall condition, the terms of trade. Yeah, it should be the law of absolute advantage. कि मतलब आपके पास जो अवेलेबल रिसोर्सेज हैं जर्मनी में, और उसमें आप ज्यादा फार्मास्यूटिकल बना रहे हो कंपेयर टू पाकिस्तान. Although you have the same resources, if you are using the same resources, but your output is greater in number. So this will be absolute advantage. Which statement about inflation is correct? Inflation will lead to rise in exports. Inflation will lead to Rise in real income, neither rise in exports, neither rise in real incomes. Inflation will lead to a rise in the cost of living. Inflation will lead to a rise in the purchasing power. Inflation will lead to a rise in cost of living. आपकी जो cost of living है वो increase कर जाएगी because of inflation. Why is that? Why is it that a country's balance of payment must always balance? हाँ भाई, balance क्यों होना चाहिए आपका balance of payment? Exchange rate changes will correct any deficit or surplus. A country's deficit is balanced by another country's surplus. The current account is balanced by capital or financial account. The government must act to correct any disequilibrium. Why the balance of payment should always balance out? Because if you have either a surplus in one account, then there should be deficit in the other two accounts. Say so. If the current account is balanced by capital and the financial account. सही है, बाकी दो अकाउंट या तो पॉजिटिव में होंगे सरप्लस में या डेफिसिट में. अदरवाइज यू विल नीड जो फोर्थ अकाउंट होता है आपका नेट एरर्स एंड ओमिशंस का सस्पेंस अकाउंट. Which argument for protection would be most relevant if the government of country X decides to exercise voluntary export restraints in its trade with country Y? I'm back. So, which argument for protectionism would be most relevant if the government of country X decides to exercise voluntary export restraints in its trade for country Y? Voluntarily वो reduce कर रहे हैं country Y से trade. So कौन सा argument जो है वो most likely valid है? अच्छा, voluntary export restraint would achieve immediate correction for X's balance of trade deficit. X was balance of trade deficit क्यों होगा if they are reducing their exports? It should be balance of payment surplus. Voluntary export restraint would cause the level of GDP to increase in country. Why GDP country X में बढ़ेगा नहीं, कम हो जाएगा अगर export कम होगा. Voluntary export restraints would help to negotiate improved trading conditions between X and Y. ये हो सकता है. Voluntary export restraints would help to reduce the level of unemployment. So yeah, in country Y. Voluntary export restraint would help to reduce the level of unemployment. आपके यहाँ बढ़ेगी. The correct answer is yeah. C. Good job. The average price of a country's exports increased by 5%. Exports के prices 5% से बढ़ गए भाई. And the average price of its imports increased by 10%. What can definitely be concluded from this information? Its balance of trade will improve. Its balance of trade will worsen. Its terms of trade have improved. Its terms of trade have worsened. हाँ भाई, terms of trade क्या हो जाएंगे? Terms of trade खराब हो जाएंगे क्योंकि exports are increasing but at a lower pace compared to the imports. So the terms of trade have worsened. Look at 24. There is an increase in indirect taxes. The indirect taxes बढ़ गए. What will be the impact on demand pull inflation and cost push inflation? दोनों पे क्या impact आएगा if there is indirect taxes? हाँ भाई, what will happen? Why the demand pull inflation will fall? देखो कॉस्ट पुश इन्फ्लेशन तो इंक्रीज करेगा बिकॉज आपके यहाँ कॉस्ट बढ़ जाएगी. सप्लाई का aggregate supply का will shift back if there is an imposition of indirect taxes throughout. But why the demand pull inflation will fall? Because since your taxation is increasing, then the real income will fall, and when the real income will fall, consumption in your economy will go down. So the demand pull inflation will fall. However, the cost push inflation will increase in your economy. Look at question number 25. The table shows the number of biscuits and cakes that can be produced by 4 workers in an hour. Say भाई ये आगा लॉरा है, मो है, नितिन है and उमर. ये biscuits हैं 6, 10, 13 and 8 and these are cakes 3, 10, 12 and 16. Who has the greatest comparative advantage in producing biscuits? हाँ भाई biscuits के लिए सबसे ज़्यादा comparative advantage किसके पास है? देखो अगर लॉरा एक biscuit produce करे, they will be leaving 0.5 cakes. ये एक बिस्किट प्रोड्यूस करें, they will be leaving 1 cake. ये अगर Nathan, if they produce 1 biscuit, then they will be leaving how much cake? 12 upon 13 is 0.92. And for 1, they will be leaving 2. Who is leaving less cakes for the production of 1 biscuit? कौन सबसे कम केक छोड़ रहा है? Laura, सही है? So Laura will have the greatest comparative advantage in the production of cakes. Oh, biscuits. Cakes में उमर का होगा. सही है? Is that clear? अगर वो आपसे cakes का बोलते तो you would have divided it like फिर Laura का 2 हो जाता, मो का 1 ही रहता और नितिन का it should have been 13 upon 12, 1.1 something, or for Umar it would be 16 upon 8 upon 16, which is 0.5. So फिर उमर का हो जाता in the production of cakes. Which condition is necessary for a country's balance of payment on its current account to improve if it reduces the exchange rate? सही, basically अगर आप exchange rate को depreciate करो तो कौन सी condition necessary है? Both PEDs, price elasticity of supply of its imports and exports, must be elastic. The importing country will buy all the excess supplies of its trading partners. The sum of the price elasticity of domestic demand for imports and the foreign demand for exports must be greater than 1. Yeah, this is your Marshall condition. PED of exports plus PED of import should be greater than 1. The diagram shows the effect of the United States imposing tariff on the import of steel in 2018. Which statement about the impact of the tariff is correct? Consumer surplus falls from PTO to PUO. Domestic output increases from OQ1 to OQ3. Imports fall from Q1, Q4 to Q2, Q3. The tax revenue raised on imports is P1YWP. देखो tax revenue get, this is tax revenue. TYWW. ये आपका टैक्स का रेवेन्यू है. हो क्या रहा है बेसिकली? पहले आप इतने इंपोर्ट्स करते थे at price T1. But now after the imposition of the tariff, the imports have fallen to Q3, Q2. So the imports fall from Q1, Q4 to Q2, Q3. This should be the right step. आपके imports, हाँ, आपके imports fall कर गए. और consumer surplus पहले ये सारा एरिया था, ये पूरा, and now only this is your consumer surplus. In 2012, the Indian government stated that it aimed to reduce the budget deficit to 5.1% of the GDP. Which policy is most likely to help this aim in the short run? उन्होंने अपना budget deficit reduce करना है. So which policy will help them achieve this? A decrease in import tariff, a decrease in the rate of interest. ये तो आपकी monetary policy है. An increase in the sale of state-owned assets, an increase in the government pension payment. Pension payments will increase the deficit. और import tariff भी अगर आप decrease करते हो, it will increase the deficit. द ओनली करेक्ट ऑप्शन इज स्टेट ओन्ड एंटरप्राइजेस को आप सेल करो, जिससे आपका रेवेन्यू बढ़ जाए, गवर्नमेंट स्पेंडिंग कम हो जाए, या गवर्नमेंट स्पेंडिंग इन कंपैरिजन टू योर गवर्नमेंट स्पेंडिंग योर रेवेन्यू विल इंक्रीज, which will cause improvement in your budget deficit. Basically, it will move towards a surplus because the government will generate revenue. Look at question number 29. What would make a policy of rising interest rates less likely to be effective in reducing inflation? अगर आपके interest rate increase हो रहा है, but still you are facing difficulty in combating inflation, which policy is responsible for that? Aggregate supply is increasing faster than aggregate demand. Consumers expect prices to rise even faster in the future. Consumer spending is largely paid for on credit. Interest rates are still higher abroad. हाँ भाई, which policy consumers expect the prices to rise even further? तो अगर आप interest rate को increase करते भी हो, still they will try to consume more of the goods because they have a future prediction of a price increase. Why it won't be D? The interest rates are still higher abroad. Why it is not D? If the interest rates are still higher abroad, there will be hot money outflow. And hot money outflow के आपके exchange rate गिरेंगे, exchange rate नीचे जाएगा, सही है, exchange rate नीचे जाएगा, तो उससे क्या होगा? There will be higher exports, so demand for inflation आपके यहाँ कम, मतलब एग्रीगेट डिमांड जो है वो इंक्रीज हो सकती है, डिमांड पर इन्फ्लेशन हो सकता है, बट साथ साथ क्या होगा, अगर आपके एक्सचेंज रेट नीचे जा रहे हैं, देयर कैन बी कॉस्ट पुश इन्फ्लेशन एज वेल, और वो क्या बोल रहे हैं, लेस लाइकली टू बी इफेक्टिव इन रिड्यूसिंग इन्फ्लेशन. सही है, तो इट इंटरेस्ट रेट वाला जो है, इट कैन गो बोथ द वेज, दैट इज व्हाई you it won't be a correct answer. Country X is an open economy with a floating exchange rate. It changes its to a fixed exchange rate. Which combination of policy changes would be most effective in reducing inflation? अब आपने क्या करना है, इन्फ्लेशन को रिड्यूस करना है. So which policies? What should be the fiscal policy? Rising the direct taxation. सही है, because indirect taxes will fuel the inflation. And what about the exchange rate? देखो, what is purchasing power parity? Purchasing power parity क्या होती है कि same number of goods, ये same basket of goods जो है, what is the price? बेटा अगर आप indirectly को increase करोगे ना, it will fuel inflation. सही है, इनडायरेक्ट जो प्राइस टैक्सेस होते हैं दे आर इंक्लूडेड इन द प्राइसेस ना, सो दैट इज व्हाई इनडायरेक्ट टैक्सेस को आप इंक्रीज नहीं करोगे, यू वांट टू कॉम्बैट इन्फ्लेशन ना. So, and since you want to counter inflation, your purchasing power parity should be, your exchange rate should be, the new exchange rate वो कहाँ पर होना चाहिए, वो purchasing power parity से ऊपर होना चाहिए. सही है, मतलब जो सेम नंबर ऑफ बास्केट ऑफ गुड्स थी उससे ऊपर रखोगे. क्यों रखोगे, क्योंकि आपके यहाँ फिर इम्पोर्टेड इन्फ्लेशन ना हो. सही, जो दूसरी चीजें थी वो आपके यहाँ महंगी ना हो जो बाहर से आप मंगवाते थे. सो दैट इज व्हाई द आंसर शुड बी ए इन दैट केस.